that was the start of Frank Frazetta becoming Frank Frazetta. That was the start of his fame, those covers. He knew that he had changed culture. He had wished Howard was around to see how he interpreted his character. So I think that was like one of his dreams. He's like, man, if it was just Howard, that's the praise I want.
My fellow Sumerians, today we are talking to Sara Frazetta. In case her last name didn't give it away, she is the granddaughter of the legendary Frank Frazetta. Like all of you, I'm just super curious to know what Frank was like as just a normal dude, as a grandfather. So stay tuned because you're going to find out all about that. Please like and subscribe. Help us to get to 5,000 subscribers. Without further ado, Sara Frazetta. Can you tell us a little bit about your grandfather's relationship with the Conan property?
Yeah, I mean, when he was hired by Lancer, I did talk about this a bit, and some people know, but he wasn't a reader, so he had little direction. Larry Shaw told him that he wanted a James Bama type cover, like what he did for Doc Savage. He wanted it to be iconic and powerful and strong, which was good direction. But then my grandfather really relied heavily on his mentor and his friend, Roy Krinkle, who read all of Robert E. Howard's stories, loved Conan, and he was like, listen, I'm going to give you some tips and, tell you what parts of the story you should pull from. And, obviously, he didn't know the stories, but he knew the character from Roy Krinkle. He knew the character just from a little bit of the research that he did do. And he just loved the idea of doing this like Barbarian, this strong, muscular, monstrous looking guy. So he did the Conan paintings really, really quickly, like 3 days each, maybe 1 to 3 days. And that's just because he was so inspired to do them. He did have some trouble with Lancer because they just would not up his pay. They were paying him $400 a cover, which was $3,800, which would be equal to $3,800 now, which I think that's pretty good. That's a pretty good pay rate. But if you think about how many covers were selling, it's like, well, they could have gave him 10 grand and wouldn't have killed him. But publishing's never really making as much money as it seems. There's so many costs that go into it. So I think just his lack of understanding of what Lancer went out of business in 1974. They went bankrupt. So there were, I'm sure, many sides to that story of why they couldn't give Frazetta $10,000 a cover. So that dampened his relationship a little bit with Conan properties at the time, but really more so Lancer. But man, that was the start of him, Frank Frazetta, becoming Frank Frazetta. That was the start of his fame, those covers.
Oh no, please don't fall.
That'd be funny though. You should put that in the episode if that happened.
I thought about just not saying anything about the wind chime. That's going in the video. That was fun.
Okay, back to Conan.
I've interviewed a lot of people for this podcast, and almost every single one of them, when they talk about their first exposure to Conan, they were drawn in by the Frazetta covers on those Lancer paperbacks. I mean, myself included, my dad handed me down his Lancer paperbacks from the 60s. And it was without question like Frank Frazetta's art that drew me in and made me stop out of all the piles of books and this is the one I want to read.
Yeah.
So I feel like if there was ever a case for an artist to get paid more, it was him.
He really did change the whole trajectory of the Conan stories with his imagery. I mean, they go together. It's it's a perfect pairing. It was perfect timing in his career. And I mean, I try to play devil's advocate. I'm like, okay, I have to understand the side of the publishers as well. But yeah, I have to, I'm biased. I mean, it's my grandpa, but I don't think he was arrogant to say that, because he really, he brought the power in those paintings. That first one, I mean, you look at it and you're like, God, what was he wasn't even on drugs. How did he do this? It's insane.
Did he ever mention Conan at all? Because you said that he didn't read the books.
He mentioned his art. Yeah. I mean, he was really proud of his paintings. I mean, so my grandparents always sold art throughout, just him being an artist. That was how they made their money. And his Conan paintings were the paintings he just would not part ways with. He would just absolutely not sell them. He did have one offer. It didn't come through, but someone said in the 80s that they were willing to pay $100,000 for the Conan the Adventurer painting, the Conan the Barbarian. And they took it there, and then it didn't go through. So that was like the one time he was like, well, in the 80s, 100,000, that's a lot of money. So, but it never ended up happening. And so he had all of his Conan paintings in his museum, and then some of them hung in the house. And he just was like, he'd just point to him and be like, that was good work right there. Like he wasn't, I mean, like I said before, he wasn't arrogant. He was just very confident in who he was. And he knew that he had changed culture with his paintings. So, I think he was always just proud that he was the one that could help Robert E. Howard's legacy. And he had mentioned before in an interview that he had wished Howard was around to see how he interpreted his character. So I think that was like his, one of his dreams. He's like, man, if it was just Howard, that's the praise I want. I want Howard's praise. So that was kind of a cool thing. He didn't say that directly to me, but my relationship with him was different because he had a stroke in 96. I was born in 88. So by the time we could have those like in-depth conversations, he wasn't able to really recall names as well, and he kind of fumbled his words a lot, and that's just because of his trouble with speaking from the stroke. So, we had more like intimate grandpa and granddaughter kind of relationship. I also was, a young girl, not very interested in asking questions about Conan the Barbarian, or I was into Barbie. So if he would have painted Barbie, I think I would have had more questions for him.
I mean, I want to see that.
Yeah.
A Frank Frazetta's Barbie? Like, yes, please, sign me up.
She'd be so curvy. She'd look so good.
She's like standing on a pile of skulls or something. Like, that'd be great.
I mean, he kind of did. I mean, Tigra, right? I mean, that's like his...
That's true.
His Barbie, I guess, sorts. And I was interested in Tigra.
I love Fire and Ice.
Yeah, no, Fire and Ice.
She's cool.
Oh my God. Well, I just loved that movie. I watched that movie when I was like 5 with him because he didn't waste any time. He wasn't like, oh, it's a kid, maybe I shouldn't. No, he's like, now you're gonna watch what Grandpa made. I'm like, it's pretty cool, Grandpa.
It's just a beautiful movie.
Yeah,
it's one of my favorites.
Yeah,
I love 80s fantasy, and that's like just really up there for me.
I love movies. I'm a movie girl, but I think it was more of like awe that he made something. But he was he was a little critical over the movie. He loved it, but he was wishful that he could have had more creative say on. I mean, it was a collaboration. It was Ralph Bakshi, so he always wished that he could make his own movie, and that never happened because of his health conditions. So I think he would say, "Aren't these great? This is all based off my paintings." But he loved the backgrounds by James Gurney, Thomas Kincaid. He loved the music. The William Kraft was the one who scored it. So he was proud of so many elements, but he liked to have control. So he just wished that he could have a little bit more control over something that was solely his.
I didn't know that Kincaid was involved with that. That's really cool.
It was like their first jobs, Gurney and Kincaid, right out of school. So, I mean, they got really lucky getting those guys because those backgrounds are amazing.
They're amazing.
Yeah.
Did he ever tell you like any of his ideas for movies that he wanted to make?
He really wanted to make a horror movie, but he never got into any like specifics. He did say that he never wanted to do animation again. He said it was like hell. He's like, no, thank you. So he did want to do a live action film. And I know he would want to make it something like a classic horror film, something, his favorite was Night of the Hunter. And it's all black and white. It's Robert Mitchum,
classic.
So moody. Yeah, that scene with her under the water in the car. And I mean, it's just so, it's just spooky. It's like that old eerie feeling. So I think he would have done a great job. I don't know if he would have gotten a studio to back him, but just sucks.
I would have done it if I had the dough. Like, come on,
I know.
Let the man make a movie. That's so cool because he was into photography as well.
Yeah.
So it seems like that might have been like an unexplored art form that he never got to make a movie. It's really unfortunate. But can you talk about his love of photography too?
I think cameras and photography was his number one passion, to be honest. Like when I think about the time that he spent just taking pictures of me as a little girl, I was the first grandchild. So it was like this, whole new adventure for him. And I have thousands of pictures of myself because of Grandpa. And I remember just saying, Grandpa, no more pictures, please. And he'd be like, you're so cute. And he'd get more energy from me being like, just adverse to him taking photos of me. So he found that funny. But he had his own dark room in his studio. So he would just spend hours developing film. Most of his photography was family photography, because when he was 40 years old, he bought his own property in Pennsylvania, about 60 acres of land. And, there's not a lot going out when you have not a lot going on when you have property. He wasn't in the city anymore. So most of his photographs were his kids and their friends and his wife, Ellie. But I think he had photos, I'm sure, when he was in Brooklyn, but I don't know what happened to them. I don't know, maybe they just got lost over the years. I know he loved to go to the Brooklyn Zoo and take photos of the animals. He never went to the zoo and would take a sketch pad. He would always just take the pictures first and then refer back to them. Even though he said he never used references, he used references from time to time. I mean, he had a photographic memory, and that helped him a lot as an artist, because something that would just really impact him, it would sear into his memory. But he did some, if it was a lighting issue or just an animal he wasn't really familiar with, he would use his photographs.
Well, it makes sense because his art is so vivid, so raw. He really was someone that just absorbed the world around him and was able to translate that in an incredible medium.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to me that photography would be something so exciting to him. If your grandfather had grown up today, do you think he would have become more of a internet personality? Would he have enjoyed that aspect of our current culture?
Absolutely. He would have been a selfie king. I mean, he knew he was really good looking, so he loved self photography, and he took some beautiful pictures of himself. I mean, he looked like a supermodel, and he would get the lighting right and how he would angle it, and he loved the camera, and he loved how he looked. I mean, so he would have seen all Frank Frazetta and his art. Before he passed away, it was 7 months before he passed away, I was spending a ton of time with him. He had moved to Florida, and I actually made him his own Facebook page. And he was so excited because, I mean, he was really isolated when he was older. I mean, like I said before, he was on his property. People would come to the museum, but it's kind of out of the way. It's an hour and a half from the city. There's really no place to stay in East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. It's just, he didn't like being there at the end. He really wanted to move to Florida. The only reason he didn't move to Florida sooner was because of his health issues. So he was really isolated, and he hated and he loved people at the same time. The complexity I'm sure most of us feel, but he did love having people fan over him and be excited about his work and tell them how he impacted them and what, how it changed the course of their life. So when he got this Facebook account, he just sees all these comments and friend requests coming in. And I think at the time it wasn't capped at 5,000 friends. It was just unlimited. So thousands and thousands of people were coming in, and he's like, they're all here for me? I'm like, yeah, Grandpa, they're all here for you. And he's like, wow. He's like, they like me? I'm like, yeah, they like you. I'm like, everyone, it's crazy, right? And he's like, oh my God. So he was, I really do, I don't think he ever would have embraced digital art, AI art, anything like that, just because he was a traditional guy, but he would have always shared his traditional work and traditional beliefs on the platform.
I want to talk about how Frazetta Girls got started. It's super interesting. You're doing so many things.
The business was always ran solely by my grandma and my uncle. And after my grandma passed away, my grandpa wanted all of his children to be able to be involved with the business to some degree, whether it was having original art or at least having the right to do something commercially. So he was very adamant about that, and his wishes were granted. And so all of the children were able to do something. And that's when my mom, Holly, approached me, and she said, I know you're doing your own thing. I just had graduated from college. I was working at a production studio. And she's like, I know you want to do something creative, but just consider working with your grandfather's legacy, because you were so important to him. You guys were so close. Your passion is going to be recognized by other people just because of your love for him. And I was like, oh, okay, you know, what does this entail? And she's like, well, we're going to go sell the vintage posters at a Comic-Con. And so we legitimately started with like the vintage posters, a Frazetta signature t-shirt that my mom came up with. We started going to the Comic-Cons. We were really aligned with Robert Rodriguez, the film director at the time, because he was just announcing that he was going to remake the Fire and Ice as live action. So he really was helpful in that. I mean, that's really what got me excited, because my grandma did a great job with the business for so many years. She was, basically running it by herself out of her house. So, she taught herself everything. So she was definitely someone to like look towards, like, okay, grandma, you know, thank you for setting an example. But so many times my grandma would say, like, never do a business like this, go be anything but this of what I'm doing. So she was kind of like negative towards it. So I always had that in the back of my head. And then with the family feuding, and there was a lot that came with it.
Good.
But what I saw, like, from Robert Rodriguez's vision of like even making like the posters into these giant Jaclays, like limited editions, and he came out with these like full sublimation t-shirts that people just went crazy for. So I was like, it sparked my interest of like, all right, I think there is something like way bigger that we could do with Frazetta. And I was never against any kind of merchandising, because I knew that's what my grandparents wanted. It wasn't like, oh, you're selling out with Frazetta. No, my grandpa wanted his artwork commercialized. He wanted it on various things in taste. So I was excited about that. My mom and I ran it for a few years together. We really weren't making any money. I mean, at the time, like, every convention was a loss. And then it got to the point where I was like, okay, I really have to rely on other jobs right now. So I was always doing like 4 jobs at a time, like social media management and, you know, a day job at a spa or whatever I could do at real estate. But then in 2017, my partner, who I've been with since 2009, his name is Joe. He was like, you know, I have a lot of understanding in merchandising and imports, exports, like just things that you'd need for a business. He understood the online market. He was like an early adopter on eBay and understood the e-commerce really well. So he was like, I think you should stop going to Comic-Cons, and I think you should start focusing on an online presence. And let's like boost the social media. Let's get this all going, like get a website that's functional and really start merchandising. So when Joe, my partner, came in, that's when a couple of years after that, I was able to make Frazetta Girls my full-time job, like in 2019. And then from 2019 to now, here we are in 2024. That's what I've been solely focusing on. But you know, so many years, it's a part-time like hobby essentially of passion, because we were in a hole for a long time. So my mom basically, what I'm getting to is my mom basically stepped aside. She is a founder, but she was like, all right, when you guys start making money, I'll come in again, maybe invest some things. But she's like, I'm good with my original art. I don't need to do this. So it's really just been Joe and I, and you know, it's always evolving. When we got into Frazetta, our icon collectible line, we were like, okay, this is what the direction we needed to go in, and it's great for us, and we're expanding our team now, and we're able to invest in things that we've really wanted to do, but you know, we don't have the money to do it. So it's great. I mean, and every day, my day to day is just ever changing. It's just whatever is heeding the call that day. That's what I start. And you know, like I jump around on projects. We're going to get into publishing. There's so many things. And I think that's the most fun part of it, is like, it's endless. What my grandpa set up, I mean, it's insane. Like I'm so blessed to be able to work in something creative. Again, that's something my grandpa created and get to create from his creations. It's incredible.
The website's great. The YouTube channel's awesome.
We are working on a new website right now because we are not satisfied. We're never satisfied. I'm like,
there
you can't be though. You can't be complacent. You have to always keep evolving. And I will never I will never think it's good enough.
Was your grandfather like that too? Was he a perfectionist?
Oh my God.
Or was he able to like finish something and let it go?
No, he never let it go. That's why he repainted so many of his masterpieces. I mean, I know an artist is supposed to have one masterpiece, but I think my grandpa defied that. But he would go back. The only ones he didn't touch, like Death Dealer 1, there were a few that he didn't touch. Death Dealer 1, he knew was like, all right, I hit it out of the park. I'll never touch it again. Death Dealer 2, pretty sure same thing. He never touched it again. But most of his Conan, Conan Sacrifice, the Avenger, he got that back and he just swiped out Conan. He's like, it sucks. I'm redoing it. And then he kept working on it. He reworked the girl. He just kept working on it. He just, I think
I listened to another interview you did, and you said that he maybe adjusted the neck of Conan in that first adventure.
Yes, that one he reworked in front of Roy Krankle because Roy Krankle came in with his knife and turpentine and sliced off Conan's head off the canvas. And he was like, that was Roy Krankle's relationship with him, where he was his mentor. And what I've been really like absorbing Roy Krankle's body of work and all of the greats that came before Frazetta to see like where my grandpa really got his inspiration from. And Roy Krankle was freaking fantastic. I mean, what a freaking painter he was, and his knowing of anatomy, and just, I mean, they weren't as his paintings weren't as powerful as Frazetta with like the muscles and the sexiness with the women, but he really understood movement, and he just had anatomy down. So he was correct. The first Conan the Adventurer, I know what my grandpa was going for with him kind of like leaning over and having the shoulders up. Like it was more like a little bit of like a monster, savage creature. But anatomically, it was incorrect. And Roy called him on that. So when he got his, he really, I don't know. I mean, I know the Conan the Adventurer was already a huge hit when it was published and people loved it. But I think it became so iconic because of Roy's direction. I mean, if he didn't have that, just like that stance, that power stance, I don't know if it would have resonated with as many people as it does today. I really do think Roy, like, flowers to Roy Krankle. He was just such a, I mean, if you could have that kind of person in your life where they're just like, yeah, you could do a little bit better. Like always giving you a little bit of a push. And you know, like I said, my grandpa wasn't really receptive to many people telling him, but I think it was because he understood Roy's talent, and how Roy was just so humble. He would take that feedback. So yeah, that was the other Conan. But with most of his paintings, like, I mean, he had a Tarzan painting that was pretty incredible. But he just kept looking at it and he said, I still like it. And he ended up taking out Tarzan and he painted this girl looking at the moon. It's called Moon's Rapture. I mean, he wouldn't even just go get a new board or new canvas. He was like, no. He's like, this one has to be what it has to be. So, yeah. I mean, with his looks, I mean, with my grandma, with the family, he was a perfectionist. I was in college and I had acne all over my face. And he'd look at me when I came through the door and he's like, you're so pretty, but get rid of those things all over your face. I'm like, Grandpa, I can't. So it wasn't him just being like rude. It was just, that was what he was. He just loved beauty. He was like, this could be better. So we're going to help you here. Just go get a little surgery.
Oh, man. So we just talked about Conan the Adventure. I believe Kirk Hammett from Metallica owns one. Is that true?
Yeah.
That's the one where he's on the horse. What are your memories of that particular painting?
Yeah. The Berserker. It's also Conan the Conqueror. There was some issues with Frazetta and Conan for a while that we cleared up, and we're back to calling him Conan, and because the owners are so wonderful of Conan properties. So Conan the Conqueror.
Do you hear that, Fred?
Yep. We love you, Fred and Jay.
He's right here.
Is he? No, he's not there. I'm like, get in your house.
I want to talk about that lost Conan painting, the Conan of Aquilonia.
Yeah.
What's the story with that?
He sent it off to Lancer. A week later, they called him up and they said, Frank, we have some bad news for you. What? The painting is gone. It was stolen out of the office. What? Like, first instinct, like, bullshit, you guys stole it. You took it. Like, it was, instant defense. You're lying to me. I'm pretty sure my grandma called and reported it, and they reported it as well. And to this day, it's just floating out there. I bet someone like threw it away or something crazy happened where it was like such a misfortune, because I think if it was in someone's private collection, it would have been revealed by now. There's crazy things that happen, right? All the time. Like, a garage sale and they're selling like a freaking Monet and they're like, I had no idea. So I think someone, I think it's long gone by now, but that was when he was really pissed at Lancer, and he's like, no more. You went up my pay. My artwork has gone missing. I'm done. And that was like part of the reason that he didn't work on the film, was when they all called him, the producers and John Milius, and he was like, it would be cool to work on this, but because of my experience with Lancer, no, thank you. And it was at the time where he was just kind of like, I still would like to do something by myself. It was, I think Conan was right before Fire and Ice, but I think maybe the success of Conan kind of prompted him to even do the Fire and Ice film, where he was like, oh, okay, the market's ready for this. With Conan, what I was reading with the film, it was like, they didn't know. Like, really, everyone was kind of like, I don't think this is going to work. No one's going to like this. It's not going to be well received. And then that was all BS, and everyone loved it. And, still to this day, people say that's one of their favorite films, and, gave Arnold Schwarzenegger his career. And I think part of the reason, too, why my grandpa didn't work on the film, and a couple of people have confirmed that this was probably true, was he hated traveling. So he would have had to go to Spain, and he was like, no. He's like, I don't leave my house. I'm good. He's like a true like New Yorker, Italian. I don't leave my house. I go to my stoop. I go to my my couple of my spots, and that's it. Yeah.
Well, there's no question that movie was inspired by his work.
Oh yeah.
Did Marvel ever reach out to him to try and do any like covers for Conan or Savage Sword at all?
I don't know firsthand, but I'm sure they did. I mean, I think everything after his covers, they were like, Frank, please be involved. Like, we need you. Yeah. I mean, it's still, like I said, that's why it's so important now that we've merged finally together. We're working together because of the fandom. Like, everyone wants Conan and Frazetta to be together. It's just how it's supposed to be. But just for so long, I mean, my grandpa had a grudge against something. He held that pretty strongly.
Whenever he brought up Conan, was it a bit sour, or what was his reaction?
Lancer, he called them bastards. He was pissed off at them still all those years later. But and then I think that's like a good lesson. It's like the way you treat someone, it could have this like trickle effect, this domino effect that can go on for a century, and then you can't even put that together of what that could do to the course of a legacy. And I always go back and go, God, what if he did take the job as the production designer for the Conan film? What if he did do the movie poster for it? Like, what would have been then? And what if he did work with the comics? Like, having that pairing back then, what could that have produced in terms of just fandom and art and culture? So, yeah, I think it's just like important to think about that and always think, okay, if there, of course, there's always falling outs, but if you know someone's true worth, like, respect that and take care of it. And Larry Shaw did not.
Well, did he have like a den that he painted everything in, or a studio?
Oh, yeah, he had a studio that he mostly lived in. Because my grandparents fought like cats and dogs, so they were. So he was on the other side of the house in his studio. I'd come in the house and I'd be like, "Grandma," and she's like, talking or whatever. And then she'd go see Papa in his studio, and I'm like, "Oh, poor Grandpa, all alone in the studio." But yeah, he was down like there was like a sunken living room in their house, so you'd go down to the sunken living room, and then you'd turn the corner. His dark room was on the right, and then his studio was to the left, and he had his big screen TV, and his art desk and his animal couch. I think he had a cheetah print couch and like that's
so cool.
Like a zebra rug. He had all these like African relics everywhere, and then his art like stacked up in his huge armoire full of all of the cameras. And I mean, he was a huge camera enthusiast is undermining it, but he had like 1,000 of them. He collected them. He loved them. He would actually trade his original art for cameras. And that's when my grandma started, and my grandma started like locking him out of the museum. Then she's like, Frank's not in today. He's not feeling well. And it was probably more so because they just got in a huge fight. And you know, and she's like, he's not coming in.
That's not quite a fair trade.
No. And she'd get really pissed off at the people that would take advantage of him. She'd be like, really? You know that a pen and ink is not equivalent to a camera. And so, she had to be the gatekeeper. He was just always pretty much lounging on his couch. He had his little coffee pot and would drink like 3 pots of coffee a day. That was his water intake. He wouldn't drink water. He just drank coffee. You'd say the water's in the coffee. I'm like, yeah, but you got to drink. He still made it to 84, just living off of caffeine and sugar. Those were his drugs of choice. So, yeah, he would always have something on his easel. He'd always be like tinkering on a piece. What I remember him tinkering at the most was Reign of Wizardry. That was his off-limits piece that he wasn't allowed to have in the museum because my grandma became really religious at the end of her life, and she was like, this is Satan. It's bringing Satan into my home and my museum.
That's so interesting.
I'm like, oh God. So
that's so interesting.
But my grandpa, you know, it's freaking he wasn't able to see as well at that point, so he did kind of ruin it a little bit. Sorry, Grandpa, but he did. Just because he just kept working at it. It was his. I think he was, there was like a little bit of like, I think a power dynamic going on there where he was like saying like, you know, screw you to my grandma. That's why he kept working on it. It was married over 50 years, sometimes bound to happen. It was just like, it was great though. He had all like the old rug in there and the carpet, rugs. So it was just like a really cozy place. And that's where we would just hang out. We'd play video games, we'd watch movies.
Oh yeah, that's so great.
So many times.
Ray Harryhausen was going to make a Conan movie in the 60s, and he wanted it to be inspired by Frank Frazetta. The reason it didn't get made was he was so inspired by those covers. The reason it didn't get made was because he wanted it to be just like a Frazetta painting, like violent, bloody, like visceral. He wanted the carnage there. So it would have been like all the cool stop motion creatures, but it would have been like an R-rated stop motion movie, which is just not what he was known for at the time.
That would have been so sick. That would have been so epic.
Right?
God, why didn't he fund the things
he would have been perfect for that, right?
Yeah.
I bet that your grandfather probably would have got along good with Ray Harryhausen. They seem like...
Yeah, but I don't know if he even knew that, to be honest. Like, maybe he did, but he couldn't recall that to me, personally. But I feel like he would have been really, really proud of that because he was such a fan of Harryhausen. I mean, I am too. His work was insane. Like that Sinbad, it's like...
Isn't it great?
It's crazy.
Oh, can I ask about the Robert Rodriguez Fire and Ice movie? What was that going to be like? Because I think it's pretty obvious looking at Robert Rodriguez. He was a huge fan of Frank Frazetta. He was a huge fan of your grandfather's. He even had him commission a painting for From Dusk Till Dawn, which, like, how cool is that? Like, how many people can say, like, George Clooney and Tarantino can say, oh, Frank Frazetta painted me, like, get out of here. That's mind-blowing.
So he wrote my grandpa a letter, I believe, in, like, 95, and then called the house, and no one was getting back to him. And my dad found the letter in my grandpa's studio, and he was like, Frank, he's like, Robert Rodriguez wrote to you. Like, I mean, this is like kind of a cool opportunity. Don't you want to get back to him? And he's like, he did? And he was like, oh, Ellie didn't really like tell me anything about it. So it was my dad that actually was like, you know, saying, hey, maybe you should, you know, get in touch with him. So he called him back, and I think Robert went to visit him. I'm pretty sure he did. So their relationship goes back some time. And then when Robert, you know, wanted to, I think it was like 2010, the year he passed away, he was like able to secure the rights with Bakshi Estate And then because of, Robert's respect for Frazetta, he was like, I want the Frazettas involved too. We got to, make this a collaboration. So, he was in touch with my mom at the time and her siblings, and they were just, he got pretty far. He had Justin Sweet doing the concept art. He had Sony pick it up, and Sony was going to be the studio. And I actually talked to him recently because we really never knew like why exactly it didn't get made. And kind of like Harryhausen, the studios just didn't want to greenlight something that was Frazetta. And, Robert really wanted to make it Frazetta and scantily clad women and everything at the time. I mean, 2015, we really went through a transition politically, and it changed. And it was like maybe the worst time to present a Frazetta film to the audience. So the studio backed out, and now it's just been on pause. But, like I said, Robert still would be, I think, the one to do something with Frazetta, specifically Fire and Ice. But yeah, he hasn't lost his passion. I'm going to go actually see him soon. He's got so many of the originals, and his passion is, I think Robert is like one of the number one. There's a few number one fans. I don't want to like say anyone's the most passionate. There's a lot of passionate Frazetta fans that like know everything about him, and I would say Robert's up there though. He knows him. He just respects the hell out of him and credits his career to Frank Frazetta, and just such a love and respect. I mean, his house is full of Frazetta art everywhere. So I don't think you can get more passionate than that, collecting Frazetta art.
What are your favorite memories of your grandpa?
My favorite memories of my grandpa were every single time that I saw him, he like celebrated my presence. He really gave me this delusion that I was special. I was special to him. And it was like, every time I would go just around the corner into his studio, he would celebrate. He'd be like, there she is. And I've never felt an embrace from another human being like that. My grandma was close second. She was the same way. But my grandpa, man, he just like lit up, and we just cracked each other up. We just had this bond, this spiritual bond of like really understanding each other. He understood like my dark sense of humor, and like when I would go at him, he'd go at me back. Like I think partly it's like our astrology signs just really like understood one another. But yeah, he was just the light of my life. And I remember, him taking the time to really be in nature with me, out on the property. He would just like, would go up and like, he'd tell me all the tree species and look at the moss and the little animals, like the frogs, and would pick, berries. I don't remember what berry they were, but we would pick, fresh little berries off this little bush and bring them back to my grandma, and she'd clean them. And just like this, like really wholesome childhood experience with him, where it was just so present. And, I remember being a kid without technology. Some would say, oh, it's the technology, or like not present as much anymore. But even then, like I remember adults just have their head down reading a book or whatever they were into, drama, gossiping. Like my grandpa was one of the most present people I've ever met. And I think that's part of like why he was so good at like observing and taking it all in, because he was there. He was there. He was in the moment. He was there with you. He'd look you in the eye. And so yeah, that was just, those are my favorite memories with him for sure.
What are the most important lessons that you learned from your grandfather, and how have those lessons carried over to your work with Frazetta Girls?
Not giving a shit attitude, like just kind of like, but just saying I'm gonna be here when I'm criticized, and I'm just gonna keep going. And I am sensitive like my grandpa was. I mean, I remember my grandpa getting really hung up on criticism. Like someone would write something, someone wrote a hit piece on him in the comics journal, and he really held on to that. I mean, he had all these thousands and thousands of fans, and then the one person that was a critic that came out and said he was washed up, or his art wasn't that good, and he'd hold on to those things. But like my grandpa, I'm sensitive, but I also use that criticism to drive me forward. Say, oh, okay, all right, like, yeah, I'm my own worst critic. I could say, I'll say the nastiest things that maybe no one ever thought about myself. And I'll always be like that. But I also like appreciate when, like, you know, a hater comes out or something, because I'm like, all right, now I'll show you. Now you just helped me grow. So my grandpa was like that, and I'm a lot like that, where it's eating us, but it's like feeding us at the same time, if that makes sense.
What are some things that you'd like to do with Frazetta Girls that you haven't had the opportunity to do yet?
My top goals are to hit the goals that my grandfather didn't in his lifetime because of, you know, money constraints or studios. So definitely film, and love, you know, video games to follow. We would really, really hoping we can get the lore of Death Dealer right in my lifetime. So far, I was very quick to judge and say, how did they miss on Death Dealer when my grandpa was alive? Like, how could it go so astray from his vision? And, you know, he never really had a concrete story for Death Dealer. He wasn't a writer, he was a storyteller, but he needed a writer to understand his work. And I just never understood how, with him alive, how that didn't happen. Then after doing it on my own, I was like, okay, don't judge so quick, sweetheart. Like, it doesn't, sometimes things aren't, you know, they don't relay as you wanted them to relay, or they don't listen to you, or you know, if you don't have the money, you don't get the final say. That's how life works. So I really think, you know, having that ability to get the lore correct of how my grandpa envisioned his character is going to be one of the most important things. And then just continuing to honor him in doing sculptures and action figures and merchandise that he would have really appreciated. And that's always the forefront of our mind. Like, don't just do it to do it. We did come from that at a certain point where, you know, I could look back at things and go, oh, maybe that wasn't the best idea. But everything, and it's been like this for, you know, at least a year now, a couple years, everything has to make sense of, like, why is this on this item? Don't just do it to do it. Just do it because it pairs well together, and there's a reason for it. And that's, you know, a lot of the reasons why we used to have like a lot more output of like collections, and now we're kind of taking a step back and going, let's just really take our time on merchandise. Like, let's not just put it out. That's part of growing as a business, having the luxury to do that. You know, you can't, some people are like, yeah, easy to say. And I was there, but now we're at this point where we can take a little bit more time and put our heart and our energy into the right places. So everything under the sun, really, it's just to honor him and to make sure that he would have approved.
Well, it really shows. Like I said, I mean, the Tigra action figure is amazing.
Thank you.
I can tell that the stuff that you guys, you're very careful about who you choose to work with. And there's an artistry behind all of it.
Yeah.
So Conan the Adventurer is the one where he has the skulls.
Yes, that's the Conan piece, right? Like, that is but I think if I had to say which Conan was my favorite, I've actually never thought about this before. His snow giants, like, I mean, I've seen that one many times in person, and that one is breathtaking. Conan the Buccaneer, which was also called Conan the Destroyer, I have to say I liked the first Conan the Buccaneer better. I don't know. I know that he really liked his Conan the Destroyer repaint. And I thought it looked more of like Jack Palance, like kind of like cartoony. Like I liked it. It's good. I thought there was something like almost like scary about his original published Conan the Buccaneer, which I really liked. It was this like power when he was like coming up from the bodies, and like the way that his, like, you could just feel that like tension. And that's, I think that is one of the paintings I wish he would have done two versions, where I'm like, God, no, why did you have to repaint it now?
No.
His Conan, the Avenger, he did a much better repaint on that when he renamed it Sacrifice. The Conan, the Avenger, I thought the Conan looked, oh God, what are those little like faces? Like, you know, the little like Christmas Town faces where like they're singers and they're like, mouths are like caroling.
Yeah. The carolers.
Yeah, I thought that one kind of had like a caroling face, the first Conan the Avenger. When I look at it, I always like think of that. I'm like, it's like a little caroling face. So that repaint was justified. His Conan, the Sacrifice, Conan the Avenger was absolutely breathtaking. My mom actually owns the Conan Man-Ape, and that original is in her
Yeah, that's cool.
That one's insane.
Yeah.
Like, just when artists come to the museum and they're always like pointing out little things like techniques that I'm not privy to, and they just point it out where it's like, God, what he made it look so simple, but it's so layered, it's so dynamic. That piece is just insane. And then the Conan the Usurper, chained. I mean, that one, God, with the snake, freaking A.
That's straight out. They ripped that right out in the movie too.
Yeah. Well, he kind of ripped it off. He ripped it off, I think, from himself. I think I was reading about this the other day. He had one of the panels in his original Thunder comics. A lot of the times, Frazetta would swipe himself, which is kind of interesting. He would just like recycle the idea. It's like, oh, that was maybe he did it subconsciously, where he was like, oh, that was like, something powerful to him, and then he went back to it. But yeah, that one was really incredible. Conan of Aquilonia, I think, was my least favorite Conan painting, the one that got stolen. Yeah, he's good.
He also did a Bran MacMorn painting, which is another Robert E. Howard character, which is cool. That's
so underrated, that painting. It's so underrated. That painting is so masterful if you look at it and you just go, oh, they had Conan's head on one of the spears. Yeah. He would do little Easter eggs.
I wish that he had done more Robert E. Howard characters. It's cool that he did Bran MacMorn, but it would have been so cool to see his take on Solomon Kane.
Oh, yeah.
Or especially since he said he loved horror. Like, I bet he would have eaten that right up.
God.
So he would have just killed it with Solomon Kane. I bet that Solomon Kane would have been far more successful and well-known today if he had done even just like a handful of paintings for that character.
I agree with you. Biased, but man, what a world. Maybe in a parallel universe.
Sara, thank you so much. I mean, it was such an honor. You're doing such an incredible job carrying on your grandfather's legacy. Please, everyone, go check out Frazetta Girls' website. Order some amazing merch, the coolest merch out there. Honestly, I'm genuinely serious. You have the Fire and Ice comic that will eventually continue, which is great. And this was just an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Pleasure's all mine. Thank you for having me and saying such sweet things.
Also, check out the YouTube channel, guys. Frazetta Girls, YouTube.
Frazetta Fridays.
Gosh,
Frazetta
it's
Girls.
Awesome. Sara also has an amazing video on Conan. Go check it out and subscribe. Thank you so much, Sara. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
That was pretty great. I actually got to meet up with Sara and Joe at Comic-Con. That was so fun, and they're just as nice in person. Once again, check out FrazettaGirls.com. Check out their Instagram, their YouTube channel. One of my favorite things about this job is getting to meet all of these amazing, incredible people and hear their stories. Thank you for all of the comments, for watching our videos, helping us keep going. Let us know, who would you like to see on the podcast? What kind of lore videos would you like us to tackle? Stay tuned, guys. It's going to be a jam-packed fall. Battle of the Blackstone is on its way, you guys. We're going to have some really fun content. We have a video on the Howard verse coming out. We're going to learn more about all those other characters that Howard wrote. We're on back for more next time.